And yes, so Tariq, you've been in here many times, and so I've spoken many times, especially in this room as well. So it's an honor for us to have Tariq Ali here with us. He has inspired generations of progressives way beyond Pakistan, and having Tariq here makes my task easier because he needs no introduction. But I thought I should go through a list of his books, and I found out, I asked one of the students here, Khizr Bhinder, to compile the list. It's over 50 books, right? Including 5 novels. Can you put up the list? Sorry, I thought she said she will put up the list.
I don't think that's working.
This is
Is it?
I think it's working. Yeah, that's
Ah,
working.
okay,
Now it's working.
okay.
So one of our students compiled, when I was trying to make the list, it was too long. So one of our students, Khizr Binder, he compiled all these books, over 50 books, you can scroll down, and only 5 books on Pakistan.
5 books
Out-
of one sort or another on
Yeah.
Pakistan, yes.
And including 5 novels. So a very wide canvas for any author by any standards. And right, so I first read the book Street Fighting Years in Pakistan. So the book Tariq Ali, the Uprising in Pakistan, How to Bring Down a Dictatorship. We were coordinating with the publisher to make it book available here. They're sent by courier, but we have not been able to trace where the courier is. So we thought we would be able to, you would be able to get a copy and get it signed, but I'm sorry, we are not able to trace the courier here. So Tariq, starting from street fighting years, early 60s, is over 60 years you have seen what's happening in Pakistan. As historians say, the longer the time span, the profound insights you have. So over to you.
Yeah, I'll start, and we can have a friendly little seminar, and I won't speak for too long, but whatever questions you want to ask, we can discuss either on Pakistan or related subjects. One has to. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. One has to start by saying, as one often does in relation to Pakistan, that the situation is extremely depressing. I don't know a period in Pakistani history where one hasn't said that, even when we had governments which promised a great deal, like the PPP government after the toppling of the dictatorship in 69, the 1970 government that was elected, because it came with a lot of hope, but at the same time, Pakistan broke up. So, but the reason Pakistan broke up is because, in my opinion, and I've argued this from that period onwards, is that the Pakistani elite, particularly the military and parts of the civil service, and some of the political parties refused to accept a majority for the Awami League. It's crazy. They'd won a clear majority. They were waiting for Parliament to convene in Dhaka. And that is the place where some compromises should have been and could have been made. They didn't do it. Instead, they tried to crush the Bengalis with the results that we know. So Pakistan broke up. The Pakistan Jinnah created broke up in 1971. And so the new Pakistan, again, there was some hope that something would happen, something would be done. But in the main, I have to say that though obviously the situation of the peasantry and the formation of trade unions and the condition of workers in factories increased somewhat, there's no doubt about that. But it was on the level of symbolisms largely. And the government was toppled by another military coup. So, I mean, and now we have a totally crazy situation where everyone knows that the government that has been formed, the coalition of the defeated parties, didn't win a majority, was pushed into office by the army, and the party with the largest votes and its leader has been facing repression and is in prison. So how can one take this seriously? You know, you reopen the Pakistani papers and you feel nothing's changed. They're all sort of living in a dream world. I mean, I looked at today's Dawn before coming here. Well, what do we have? The main headline is that the Chief of Army Staff, General Munir, has said that you can't be totally independent if your economy is very bad. Well, thank you. I mean, why bother making these banal speeches? You know, what's the point? Just better to stay quiet and enjoy yourself and make sure your bank managers are kept happy with your large accounts. I mean, what other purpose could there be? And then the second thing in today's Dawn, it's quite revealing. The second thing in today's Dawn is Asif Zardari meeting people he loves best to meet, which is foreign investors. Where they, it's a photograph which you've seen over the last 25 years. He's happiest with foreign investors because whether or not they invest in the country at these early stages of making decisions and plans, they certainly invest in Zardari. And, you know, I mean, it's the most corrupt president we've had for a long, long time. And this is in a country where there's a lot of competition for this post. I mean, the most corrupt politician in the country. It's not that there's no one else competing. I mean, the other party is competing all the time. So what is the point of bringing in all these old dynastic parties, which offer absolutely nothing to the people in the country? I mean, I joke with friends, though it's not a joke, that the one thing that Imran has done is that he has proved beyond any doubt that Pakistan is run by the army. There's no doubt about that. So what's the point of elections? What's the point of these joker politicians? I mean, the other joke is that Nawaz Sharif's daughter, who's chief minister of the Punjab, the largest province in the country, took a salute at a police parade dressed as a policewoman, starting wearing a police uniform. I mean, why not join the police force? You'd probably be able to do better than you are as a politician. And why not tell the main politicians of the other, give them a choice which uniforms they want. A majority will choose the army because that's what runs the show. And the others can join, you know, the Rangers if they're Sindhis or the Punjab police if you're the chief minister of the Punjab. And they don't even see the sort of irony and craziness of what they're doing. So this has been going on. I don't want to sort of repeat it, but this has been going on. I mean, there are always new quirky things like wearing a police uniform. But these strange developments have been going on for ages now, nearly 30 years. One party is elected, does a deal with another party, the army approves the formation of a government, and if you annoy the army, you're out. And some people get a bit angry with me when I defend Imran. I don't defend him in the sense of saying that he was absolutely marvelous or did amazing things. He clearly didn't, and he made numerous mistakes. But the one thing he tried to do is mobilize a new layer of people outside the framework of the dynastic parties, which is why the question is posed, why is he so popular? I mean, if you haven't done all that much, and I think the reason he's popular is that he's not a member of the old cliques that ran the country. Though he's stolen some of their people, he's not actually part of that and turned down an invitation from the PPP to form a government with them at the center, since he's been attacking Zardari and the corruption for the last decades. So he's slightly different, and people are desperate. So the votes for the PTI are votes of desperation. And then also the fact that as a head of government, he didn't completely cave in under US pressure on either sanctions against Russia and other matters. Now, this is not a big deal in itself, but why target him? The Americans made it very clear they wanted him out. I mean, they're in a completely crazed state themselves, the United States, as we can see in their reaction to Gaza. I mean, they've armed this regime. We can discuss that a bit later. But in terms of punishing Pakistan, unless they remove Imran as leader, it just shows the sensitivity now, which has replaced any serious rational discussion of politics in the Western elites as well. It's quite amazing. I've never seen them at such a low ebb, either in the United States or in Europe, in this country. So that's the one thing we have to keep in mind, is that it's not Pakistan alone who is going downhill. It's a lot of other states as well. Not we've been doing it longer. And in a sense, we're always pioneers of bad things. You know, that's what we are. But now, I mean, the situation of these two parties with no differences with each other running the government is no different from what is proposed in and is happening in Germany, and it will happen in Britain after the general election, where if any of you know of a serious difference between the government and the opposition party, do tell me after this talk. I'll make a note of it. But so this tendency of politics under neoliberal capitalism, of basically downgrading politics, hollowing out democracy, it can be seen very visibly in Pakistan, where there's no secret. Here they still try and cover it up, but the trend is a global trend in the Western world and in those countries allied to it elsewhere. And of course, in this country too, and other European countries, there are economic problems that we know of, and corruption on quite a mega level, which is different from corruption in Pakistan, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist anywhere else. And the way it's done in this country is through large-scale privatizations, which the last Tory governments have been very open about, handing contracts over to their cronies. That's what, I mean, that happens in Pakistan too. But it happens here, it happens in France, it happens in Germany, it happens in Italy on a huge level. So, you know, this is what we're living through. The point, the problem which I always raise, and which gets worse and worse as far as Pakistan is concerned, is that the people are suffering. You know, if you talk to anyone in Pakistan or go to the country, I tend to do both. Effectively, what we have is a very wealthy elite, wealthy on two levels. Wealthy in terms of the institutions, i.e., the political parties, whose principal reason for coming to power is not organizing fancy dress, but whose principal reason for coming to power essentially is to make money. Money and politics are now intertwined, as they haven't been for a very long time. I would say not, you know, in the world on a global scale, not since the 19th century, in the Gilded Age. I mean, the whole business of politics has become totally embroiled in making money. And that's why they do it. So that's one level. Then this, if this were just confined to the politicians, well, that would be bad enough. But it's hardly a secret that the armed services of the country are involved in very similar business. They're so used to it now. It's automatic that if they reach the top or if they reach, another level below that, they will make money. It'll be handed to them. I don't know the mechanisms they use, but that's effectively what they will do. Now, if we look at the conditions of ordinary people, I mean, massive rises in the prices of basic commodities on which the people depend. Food prices are totally out of control, and not just for the very poor, they've always suffered, but for the layers above them too. And all the privileges that the country has to offer financially, education, medicine, are preserved for people with big money. It's the layer that can't afford to send its children abroad. It has to work in Pakistan. And they're finding it incredibly. Some of them are finding it difficult too now. So what will happen in this situation? My own feeling is that the economic situation and the economic crisis is so bad that you could have an explosion that will take everyone by surprise, like happened in Tunisia several years ago, or when a street vendor set himself on fire and that triggered an uprising in the whole country that brought the government down, that brought in new governments, reforms promised, etc., etc. Some things were done. But short of that, I honestly can't see any of the parties today, and that, of course, includes the PTI, even had it been allowed to come to power, to doing anything serious on the social and economic level of that country. That's the problem. I mean, they should have been allowed to come to power because they'd won the election. But once they'd come to power, would they have done anything? There's no indication that they would have. And, this is made worse by another news item I read today in Dawn, which was basically saying that Imran and his wife, who are being tried for corruption, the court has ruled that they, under no circumstances to defend themselves, can they attack the army or the Supreme Court. I've never heard of this before. A judicial ruling in a court where you're trying the ex-prime minister of the country, where you say that you can't, I mean, the army threw him out for God's sake. And the Supreme Court Chief Justice has played all sorts of games, as we know. I mean, the one thing that happened after this election, farcical elections in Pakistan, is that, as you probably know, the Commissioner of Rawalpindi Division came out in public and confessed everything. Said, I was in charge of the ballot rigging. This is how we did it in Rawalpindi. This is how it was done somewhere else. We made fake stamps to take in fake votes. And he said that in several constituencies where the PTI or their independents were winning by between 60 and 70,000 votes, all that was stopped and fake votes were cast for the other parties. Now, this is a senior civil servant. And he said that he was so upset that he did actually contemplate suicide, because he said he thought the country had no future like this. How could he? It was just getting impossible. And the two people he named who had worked with him to make sure that this happened, that the election was totally and fully rigged, were who? He named them. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Chief Election Commissioner. These are the people who were involved in rigging this this election. And when the Chief Justice and the Chief Election Commissioner were asked, why did it take you 2 hours to reply to these charges that were being broadcast on television? And they said, well, you know, we weren't watching television. I mean, it's just not credible. A more honest answer was we were waiting for our minders in the ISI to tell us what to do now, since this guy had gone and spilled the beans. That I would have believed. Totally credible. But they couldn't even say that. So how anyone can believe that this particular government represents anyone except themselves and a minority of the population? So if this carries on, basically the plan was to make the election credible. That failed. To destroy the PTI through a combination of repression and bribing some of them to go over to the other parties. That's failed so far. I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised in a way that quite a large number of PTI people locked up have not budged. Not shifted their position. Some have, but not many, which is interesting. So this is the situation in which we find ourselves, and there's no, I mean, we used to dream, 30, 40 years ago, that perhaps some big changes could take place in the subcontinent as a whole. I used to argue that a good thing would be if we had some sort of EU-type federal structure in South Asia, so we could collaborate with each other, work with each other, trade with each other, travel to each other's countries, and create a new basis without challenging the sovereignty of any of the states, but have some South Asian Union from which everyone could benefit. Well, that's completely out, and not because of Pakistan, one should say, but because of the turn in India, where we've got an extreme, hard-right, semi-fascist government elected, popular by the people of that country, which makes collaboration with Pakistan virtually impossible. They're planning, if Modi wins the election again, to go on a rampage, destroying mosques. They've said that. I'm not making any of this up. Destroying mosques, pressuring Indian Muslims to think seriously about converting, making their lives miserable. This is already happening. But it's now it's happening on such a huge scale because the atmosphere created by Modi is the Indian equivalent of the big changes that took place after Thatcher in Britain. The big shift in ideology, a big move away from a public service ethos which existed here and in India. So Modi didn't just do it with privatizations. He had a very strong ideological offensive of creating what he called a Hindu nation in a country where the caste system has made it virtually impossible for Hindus to collaborate with each other, or even sit down, and eat a meal together, unless they're sure that the meal for 5 different castes who've assembled have been cooked in different kitchens with different utensils, which makes unity in any meaningful level very difficult. So that idea of a South Asian Union really depended on India, and that doesn't look as if it's going to happen soon. It might, who knows, after this thing has been produced, to be a disaster. So that notion of countries in the region working together, that's impossible now. The Indians say in private that we are prepared to collaborate and be friendly and allow our cricket teams to travel, provided Pakistan gives up any idea of self-determination for Kashmir. Well, the Pakistan hasn't done much about that, but it would be awkward to give that up, given what's been going on in Kashmir and given what is happening in Kashmir now. It'd be very difficult to give it up. There would be hostility, even within the army, to just completely handing Kashmir over, the bulk of Kashmir over to India. And this is a subject, in the repression there in that part of India is barely reported in the media in the West. Kashmir, wasn't that sorted out years ago? The answer is no. It wasn't sorted out years ago, just as Palestine wasn't sorted out years ago. There are similarities between these two nations, the Palestinian Arab one and the Kashmiri one. And both were promised self-determination by the United Nations. All the big powers voted for them, including India, by the way, when the matter was first taken up. So we have a situation where collaboration between the two powers is at a very very low ebb. Then the last point I want to make is the global crisis. We now have a situation globally, and this affects Pakistan as well. We now have a situation globally where the United States has decided, it seems from their rhetoric and from their actions, to assert their hegemony through force wherever they can. So people who attack Israel are, of course, on the genocide in Gaza, are 100% correct. But without the support of the United States and most of the European states, it couldn't have happened. And it could have been stopped. And it could have been stopped by the United States. 3 American presidents in the past, just to show that this isn't a utopian idea, 3 American presidents in the past stopped the Israelis. Truman stopped them in the 1940s. Eisenhower stopped them in 1956. And Eisenhower actually sent a message because they had occupied Palestine after the Six-Day War. He said, out of Gaza. And when the Israeli leaders, said, well, he said, no wells or buts or ifs, out. And if you don't get out, we're going to sanction you and cut off all the aid you get. That did it. Within a fortnight, they'd left. So this particular onslaught against the Palestinians is fully with the support of the United States and Biden, who is clearly, now a sick guy and basically doesn't understand what's going on. Reagan also, by the way, not a progressive president, told the Israelis to get out and stop bombing, which they did. So this time that hasn't happened. And what this indicates to me, and what is obvious if you read the American press, is that they want to divide the world on those who are for us and those who are against us. And if you're not for us, you're for Russia, you're for China, you're for terrorism, you're for this, you're for that. And trying to provoke the Chinese into a conflict on Taiwan is quite honestly, not only is it a flawed idea, there's a craziness about it. I mean, the Taiwanese, whatever else they are or aren't, politically speaking, ethnically, they regard themselves as Chinese. We're part of the Chinese Commonwealth. However many divisions we might have with the Chinese leaders. The same with Hong Kong, they are Chinese. So you can't totally create a situation against China where you can target it and tie it down. But that is what they're intending to do. They've completely wrecked the Arab world. Completely. Iraq. Over 1 million dead. Its infrastructure bombed. Its leaders lynched by lynch mobs. Basically approved by the West. Not tried, not brought before even a joke court like the ICC court, but just hanged. The same with Gaddafi in Libya. One day they were taking money from Libya. Tony Blair's ministers were visiting Libya, saying how great Libya was. And then invade Libya. And this is part and parcel of an American attempt to divide and create small states in the Middle East, which they feel will be much, much weaker. And the Israelis were, of course, totally for this. And the day Baghdad fell, the Israeli ambassador in Washington, D.C. said, wonderful news. Let's now proceed and take Damascus and Tehran, which hasn't proved so easy. But that was the plan, to completely destroy these states and republics. And I mean, if you look at Jordan today, well, it's an Israeli-American protectorate. That's what it is. It's not an independent state. It doesn't have its sovereignty. It says we only knocked down drones from Iran because they were violating our sovereignty. But how come your sovereignty is never violated when drones and bomber jets fly over your territory to go and bomb Palestine and to go Gaza particularly, and to carry out raids against Hezbollah? You never stop them. Your sovereignty doesn't become a question then. So the Middle East is severely damaged. And you have Syria divided with American bases still there, Iraq with an American presence still there, and with oil companies, Western oil companies taking the oil once again. This is what's going on. So the model of the Middle East, which they like, is the Gulf state model. That's what they would like these countries to be, sort of under their control and never getting outside their control. Iran isn't like that. I mean, Iran's biggest deal is with China. Economic deals are with China and Russia. And they can survive American sanctions. It's difficult on some issues, but they can survive them. And the Chinese have also made it clear that they're going to be very strongly opposed to any attack on Iran. Pakistan is a slight mystery from that point of view, because Pakistan has enjoyed good relationships with China from the late 60s onwards. I mean, all its leaders have visited China, whether they were military leaders or political leaders, both Ayub Khan and Bhutto, and those who came afterwards had been to China. And the Chinese attitude is, we don't interfere in your politics. What our personal views are is something we keep to ourselves. And whether they're going to permit Pakistan to become a total stooge of the United States, I doubt it. So it isn't a total stooge, but it's so dependent on money, either directly from the United States or from the Gulf states and Saudi, that they are, there's very little they can do. But if there's very little you can do, at least shut up. Don't pretend you can do anything. Just say, this is the condition we're in. And, there was a sort of strange statement that emanated from Pakistan after the genocide in Gaza began. What was that? It was basically someone in the Pakistan army said that if the United States attacks Iran, we will make our nuclear missiles available. It was never repeated. And I don't know what happened to the poor guy who actually went public and said it, but it was said. And just prior to that, if you recall, there'd been this absurd clash between Iran and Pakistan on the Balochistan border. And the Iranians said that Pakistani planes come in and bomb cities inside Iran, clearly organized and helped by the United States. So there's a lot of stuff going on there which has not yet become public. I'll stop there actually, and very happy to hear you and to answer questions.
Yeah, so I have a couple of observations, but I don't want to preempt any questions. We take a round of questions. If something is missing, then I can comment. So yeah, any questions here? Yeah, oh, here. Claire is here from the Verso publisher. She was supposed to, be selling the books. Yeah, any from this side? Any question from here? Yeah, whichever.
Hi, first and foremost, being a
It's not-
Kashmiri, I think it's not working.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, first and foremost, being a Kashmiri, thank you for writing on Kashmir and speaking.
I
for
can't
us.
hear you that well.
Again, speak. Maybe
Hello?
closer. Yeah.
Check, yeah. First and foremost, being a Kashmiri, thank you for writing for us your book, Kashmir, the Case for Freedom. And even today, you said about us. My question is, why hasn't Pakistan, over the course of history, ever been able to sustain a revolution? Even though during the 60s or 70s, there have been tries, but why hasn't there been a revolution that has been sustained? Why hasn't there been a long-term change ever in the history of Pakistan? Even today, we see like there's a glimmer of hope. People are fighting for it. Some people, some corners, some certain things are happening in the country, but you cannot say like this is going to be a long-term change. This won't happen in next 20 or 30 years. The institution of army that's been ruling the roost from the last all of these years, it still remains intact. Be it internal discipline, be it the people who support it. Why hasn't it been the case that a revolution has been sustained?
Which revolution?
Any revolution.
Oh, I see. That's a broad sweep. Well, I mean, revolutions by their very nature, if you look at any revolution that has taken place in history, anti-capitalist revolution or semi-anti-capitalist revolutions, they always fall largely. I have a view on this, which is that because institutions were not created that could sustain them. So you had, for contingent reasons, you had the establishment of one-party states in all these countries. And these one-party states blocked any contact between ordinary people and those running the country. Even though they'd broken loose from capitalism, I'm talking about the Soviet Union or China or Vietnam, even Cuba, which was the best of them and still exists for that reason, never managed to break from that. And I had arguments with, lots of people from these countries, some quite high up. Why don't you do this? And the argument I found, which they came up with, was very weak. The argument they supplied was that if we do it, the Americans will pour in money, and any opposition party that springs up will not be genuine. I said this could well happen. I don't deny that. The United States is capable of anything. But then why permit, there should be more, 2, 3 opposition parties. There can be one pro-American one. And there can be others which have disagreements on tactics and strategy with you. I mean, but this was discussed for an early period, and the fact that the Russian Soviet Union, as it was then, got isolated meant that they just drew inwards. Had there been a revolution in Germany, a very advanced country, politically and socially, before the Soviet Union, we might have had a different outcome altogether. But the fact that all these revolutions, contrary to what Marx and Engels had written in the Communist Manifesto, and contrary even to the early Lenin, took place in the most backward capitalist countries imaginable. Russia, China, completely backward on many, many levels. So the fact that they were pulled out of that particular path by the revolution was seen as a big victory in itself. And you can look at South Africa today. People have written books criticizing the ANC for what they've done. And they're right to do so. But the fact is, it was the ANC that, by their struggle, pulled them out of the apartheid system. And that gave them certain rights to the blacks, the large majority of South Africans, which they had never enjoyed before, which seems trivial to us. But, sitting in a cafe in the center of white Johannesburg and having a cup of coffee, with people who are white, brown, black, whatever, they were not allowed to do that. Apartheid didn't let them. So there has been some progress. The interesting case history, I think, is China. Because while they have gone down the capital, it's very interesting if you look at the internal documents of the discussions which the Chinese leaders Deng Xiaoping had with Gorbachev. The Chinese told the Russians, perestroika is fine, you need to restructure the economy. And we can tell you a lot of mistakes that you should avoid because we have some experience now. But if you go too quickly towards glasnost, the Americans will make a big bid to take you over. That is what the Chinese said. That's exactly what happened. Whether we like it or not, that is what happened. And so there are contingent reasons. And the Cubans, I used to argue with them. They're all my friends there. My friends are mostly dead now, but I used to say, okay, the Americans are overlooking you nonstop. I understand that. I even understand it's difficult to permit the Americans to set up a huge Miami-based political operation in Cuba, which is what an opposition party would be. Let's face it. But why do you have to ban novels? Why do you have to stop theaters? Why do you have to stop movies which are not sort of orthodox? I said, that's a big, big mistake. And I said also, following the Eastern European pattern of not allowing family restaurants is just crazy. It's so anti the Cuban tradition. And slowly, on that front, they have done all that. The last time I met the Cuban Minister for Culture, he said to me, you'll be happy. We've published all the novelists who we'd banned. in the 70s and the 80s. I said, I'm not happy or unhappy. It's normal. They should never have been stopped. It just builds them up. And it's completely unnecessary. So that's been, a huge problem. And that's the results of which, if China, the advance of the Chinese economy, there's no point, we all know, is absolutely phenomenal. Took everyone by surprise. And at first, the West was very happy, setting up trade, doing this, that, and the other, till the Chinese said, we're very, we want to collaborate on the trade and economic front, but we are China. We have a culture and a history and a language that is 2,000 years old. And you can't tell us, they said, as you say to one of the Arabs, said, hey, do this. We don't do that. And the more the Chinese became independent in terms of opposing what the United States had begun to do in the Middle East and elsewhere, the more the United States turned on them. And I think that while there's economic competition between the two as well, obviously, the fact that they can't dominate and control China, and China asserts its sovereignty, has played a big, big role with in American hostility, obviously followed by Europe.
Yep. Yes. Yep. We can bring the mic. Okay, I think it was at the back. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. It was really nice. My question is
Can
that
you speak a bit louder? Yeah.
you've laid out all the facts, and as you rightfully said, they're very depressing, and it feels like we're stuck in this loop. What do you foresee as the future of Pakistan? And is there any role that we as the public can play to make things better? Like, is there any hope for us, and how can we contribute to that? And also, I recently read that US has warned Pakistan that they're going to impose sanctions on them if they carry out business with Iran. So is Pakistan in any position to sustain those kinds of sanctions, and can we resist that? Also, how in the world is a deranged government like the US that holds any kind of morals or democratic values allowed to dictate who Pakistan can or cannot do business with? I understand that a lot of our institutions, especially the establishment, is heavily influenced by the dollars coming in. But how can we balance this out? Like, is there any scope that we continue doing business with Iran? What's in the future for us? How do you see that?
Well, the one thing which in my books and essays I always write is that the Pakistani people have tried very hard to improve their conditions. I have absolutely, no problem with what they have done. And when they thought the time right, they've come out on the streets, they've sacrificed their lives to try and improve the country in which they live. And the insurrection that took place in 1968 and 69 in Pakistan was the only successful movement of the 60s in the sense that it actually toppled the military dictatorship. Whereas in most other parts of the world, very important what happened. But I give an account of it in this book, Uprising in Pakistan. That's the movement started by students on campuses in Rawalpindi, spread to Lahore, spread to Faisalabad, spread to Karachi, spread to the most of Balochistan, spread to... So every single campus in Pakistan came out against the army. The courage of these students led to other layers coming out. And that was the amazing thing. You know, we're seeing it in the United States at the moment, by the way. What is happening at Columbia, Texas, Yale, Princeton. Well, all this happened in Pakistan, and then the schools got involved, and the demonstrations grew larger and larger, and other layers came out. Lawyers came out, junior civil servants came out, in Lahore, sex workers came out. You name the institution, and they were all out on the streets. And the key point came, in my opinion, was when younger officers of the ranks of majors and colonels said, we are not going to accept orders to open fire on the people. That was a critical moment. It happened in Lahore, by the way, that the army high command realized that it could break the army if these orders were given. Because, you know, especially in the Punjab, most of these young officers came from the Punjab. They knew what the mood was in the streets, in the cities, and even in the villages, though the peasantry didn't come out in that particular uprising. And so it spread and spread and spread and spread till it reached proportions both in East and West Pakistan, where the army had to get rid of, told the dictator to go. I remember arriving in Pakistan the day the dictatorship fell, and there was just happiness on people's faces. And in Dhaka, when students in West Pakistan were killed, the women students in Dhaka, all dressed in white, the color of mourning, with bare feet, marched in the hot, burning streets of Dhaka in solidarity with the students in West Pakistan. The first time Pakistan was actually united was during that uprising, and then they wrecked it because they weren't prepared to share power. And that was largely a spontaneous uprising. That's why I'm saying, I don't know, I can't predict these things, but if things keep on getting bad, it could happen again. There was no party. I mean, Bhutto had set up the People's Party, but it wasn't active. It then became active, and the movement, some of the best people from the movement went into the People's Party and boosted it.
How do you see Imran Khan's support with the military ranks and junior officers? How you compare this with the junior officers in the 1960s not listening to the leadership?
Yes.
So how do you see you think there's any prospect
No?
now? The
Well,
junior
Imran obviously did think that.
officers-
No, I mean, it's very obvious. When I saw these reports that the PTI was attacking the house of the corps commander in Lahore, I really rose to my feet. I said, I can't believe this is happening. And you know, the country's leading fashion designer, leading the people to try and burn the house, a symbolic attack on General GHQ in Rawalpindi, etc., etc. So then I said, either he's gone, he's lost it, because the situation isn't right to do that, in my opinion. You know, I mean, but it has now become obvious. And when I thought about it that week, I said, someone from within the army has told him that once you start an insurrection against the army will split, and a lot of them who love you will come to our side. Well, he is very popular in the army. You know, one reason is his sort of cricketing hero past, but the army didn't crack. This is the one thing we just have to understand. It's very rare for an army high command to crack. It did in 1968, but it didn't on this occasion. I mean, they were shocked, but but they were not at all scared because, you know, there was no huge mobilizations behind it. And I mean, the other thing I would warn, especially those progressive people on the left, that movements can sometimes work, like the Pashtun movement in defense of Pashtun rights. That became huge and can work because there's nothing else. No political party is defending them. But it's not easy to reproduce that in the Punjab, where everything is more or less confiscated politically by either the dynastic political parties or the PTI. So you can't simply sort of destroy that just like that. I mean, it can happen if there is a mass uprising, and the mass uprising will not be guided by any left party. It will be a spontaneous one if and when it happens, and then we'll see. I mean, you know.
So Tariq, we give a lot of credit to Imran Khan for turning mainly central Punjab against the establishment. But don't you think it's a culmination of last 40, 50 years struggle against the military? At the point it's really culminated, Imran Khan was there. You think it's just Imran Khan or the struggle going on from last 40, 50 years that it just culminated?
The problem with Imran, there are many problems, but one problem with Imran was that for a long time, he refused, he thought, which, you know, political leaders sometimes do, and it was a huge error, that he could manipulate the army.
Yeah.
Bhutto thought that too. You know, and Bhutto, after Bangladesh was formed, the army was smashed. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were in Indian prisons. The Pakistan High Command sent to Dhaka to crush the Bengalis were captured in India. So the army was in a totally weakened state. And that was the moment I argued with him and others on the leadership of the People's Party. I said, you missed your only chance. What could we, I said, this type of imperialist created army, which the British blessed us with in India, Pakistan, and which exists in Bangladesh as well subsequently, should have been dismantled. And we should have had a very small army. And when the country was threatened, or when, you know, something needed to be done abroad, conscription, people would have joined. But keep the army very small, reduce military expenditure, because this army largely has been used against its own people. It's not won any wars against anyone else, except its own people. And so that's sort of
Lot of questions
what we
together?
thought. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, anyone ask? Yeah, we could take a couple of questions together.
Yeah.
Sorry for joining late. I had an unexpected delay. My question is about hope. The lady mentioned hope as well. The last question. I see as a young but adult person that there is a paradox with hope, that we are forced or told by our traditions and ancestors, people who have struggled, to keep on locating hope for life. And I see a paradox there, because we are to locate hope in structures that are not meant for that, for the revolutionary hope. So we see it in jails where people visit you with a letter, for example. So it's really dependent, like it's a begging situation with hope. So if the other person is not kind enough that day, the solidarity is not there. And then the person who is on the receiving end, has to understand the system that is in place, that is not allowing people to extend solidarity in a revolutionary manner. So that I see as a paradox of hope, that there is solidarity, but the system in place is so big that it would be foolish to rely on it. One, that, and then materially connecting it to Pakistan's situation of ban of student unions. It's been 40 years this year that student unions have
I
been.
didn't get the last thing.
I'm saying connecting the paradox of hope to the material reality of Pakistan. How I connect is that it's been 40 years this year that student unions have been banned. 9th February was the day and 8th February was the election happening, right? Like so nearby. And what I, for example, in 2019, there was this huge movement, the one that you like, I haven't seen what you have seen, but as you mentioned, that was your only chance. This to dismantle army, I say on ground that was our chance. Not, I'm not sure about only, but in decades, it was your only chance to revive student unions. And then what happened was that progressive people within the movement, they wanted to form political party in the future. 2019, 2024 elections, they fought those elections, they lost those elections. But the momentum that was organic by the people, not by any left party, it was just a damn video of me that got viral, which I connected to the movement back. So it was not left per se, but
Okay.
it was on in left's court now. So my point being about the paradox of hope within the movement as well. What do we do?
Yeah.
Well,
Take a couple of questions together. Take a couple of questions together. Yeah. At the back there. Yeah. Okay. Him and then you can question three, take question three together. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Welcome to
I
SOAS.
can't hear you at
Yeah.
all.
Hello.
A bit louder. You have to keep it closer to you.
Welcome to SOAS, sir.
Slightly louder. Okay.
Welcome to SOAS. It's been a pleasure to be here. Pakistan, a country of 240 million people, fifth most populous country in the world. Is it loud audible?
I get you. Okay, maybe speak very loud. I can hear, yeah.
You can hear
Ye-
him.
yeah,
when
yeah.
you're- Yeah,
Yeah.
but you can repeat it.
Yeah.
I was saying that welcome to SOAS. Pakistan, a country of 240 million people, fifth most populous country in the world. I was saying that, sir, don't you think that the whole 240 million people are either somehow or the other enslaved by the military? Because in the recent general elections, when people in a free world, normally when people exercise their votes, they know that they are electing their leadership. But in the case of Pakistan, we have seen that people exercise their votes, and it's a proven fact that the mandate was stolen, the genuine mandate was stolen. So the thing is that this is happening till date. What do you think? Because this, I'm actually from Balochistan. So this thing was like we were saying it time and again that the military establishment, military is intervening in different kind of events, but that thing was not considered as seriously by the rest of Pakistan. But the same thing is happening now. And now I think that, as you mentioned earlier, that because of Imran Khan, people have realized it. So what do you think that how actually 240 million people, or maybe increasing day by day, can get true form of democracy? How actually this can happen? Because if the current scenario goes on, there is no foreseeable ray of hope for the people and the future generations.
You can,
Especially in these times of fear,
yeah.
the prevalent fear and the violence and the terror.
Yeah, genuinely. Thank you. Thank you so
One
much.
together, one more question together.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm happy to
Yeah.
answer whatever.
Yeah, we can speak.
Good evening. In your opening comments,
louder.
in your opening comments, you talked about the economic collapse in Pakistan and that the situation is so dire that it's never been as bad as it is today.
Yeah, it speaks a lot.
So my question is this:
Speak, yeah.
Yeah.
why do so many economic commentators, a lot of them trained at the World Bank and the IMF, talk about further funding from the World Bank and the IMF? Is the solution really that any if a prime minister was to come into power with a popular mandate, the first policy action that he should undertake would to announce a full-blown sovereign debt default. And why are people so scared of a sovereign debt default? Lots and lots of countries have done it, and they come through invariably stronger. Wouldn't a sovereign debt default break the stranglehold of the establishment, of the military establishment, and break the political economic structure? And then you could start again.
Yeah, can I just quickly say something on default there?
Huh?
So just quickly add something to what he just said. You know, we have an example next door in India. There's a serious economic crisis in 1990. There was the last time they went to IMF. There was the last program. And since then now, the reserves are around $650 billion. Pakistan reserves revolve around $6 billion or $8 billion. So we have an example how India reform took a benefit of the opportunity. There's always an opportunity to crisis. And secondly, coming to sovereign debt, there's been a lot of discussion on this. So Pakistan at the verge of sovereign default. The only issue is they're scared of the process. It could be painful process. But again, we have example of Argentina. They defaulted and within 2 years, they recovered. But then again, the argument is that 240 million people population, such a big country, how they are going to manage when even the supplies of essentials dry out. So yes, a debate on both sides. So Tariq?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, the other thing is this, that the West, the United States in particular, but its followers in the Western world and its institutions are capable, and as we know they have done, through economic measures of preventing countries from doing what they want to do. I mean, they did it very seriously against Venezuela, where they even brought a fake president and imagined he was the real president and recognized him. No one had voted for him and said, oh, those votes are rigged. Well, I noticed they're defending the rigged elections in Pakistan, but they have a completely different attitude elsewhere. And so it's not been easy for countries to push through their own economic policies, which may even be largely social democratic. I mean, the whole Bolivarian movement in South America was a combination of mass mobilizations and large reforms of the structure, which for a while made a huge difference. But the Western economic institutions are created for a particular purpose, to keep these countries in line. I mean, I think Pakistan should renege on the debt. That's been my position for a long time, and tell them, go and jump. We can't afford to pay these debts, and nor can most other countries. It would set an example. But who is going to do that? This government, Zardari, is going to renege on debt. I mean, it's just a joke when you even think about it. So it's not going to happen. That is simply not going to happen, because none of the political parties and those economists, there are some young intelligent economists in the country who sometimes suggest this, and they are laughed out of court or slandered in other ways, and not allowed to come up with any real alternative solutions. These are economists close to the establishment even. They're not, people I would necessarily support, but they are pretty effective. And they're saying that everything that is being done wrong. So that's the point on that. The questions raised in this dialectic of hope and movements in political parties is an interesting, it is a very interesting question. And whether the formation of new political parties can change, even progressive political parties can change much. And it's difficult to give a sort of definite permanent answer on that. But I think the institutions that we need in Pakistan, even more than parties, are the sort of what the Russians called Soviets and what in the pre-Tsarist times were councils of workers, of soldiers, of peasants, of ordinary citizens who elected their own representatives to these bodies, which became an alternative parliament, while the so-called official Tsarist parliament still existed. Something like that should be thought out, in my opinion, because it involves people who are not involved and very alienated from, in fact, the existing politics of the country. So instead of mimicking what the mainstream parties do and having their own leaders and their own press conferences and this, that, and the other, and failing, they should think of new institutions, and these institutions can be established on the level of villages, small towns, large towns. They are universal. They have a universal applicability. And they will, without doubt, create arenas for debate and discussion. And at some stage may even, help raising the level of consciousness of ordinary people so they can do something for themselves. Because the big thing that has to be insisted upon, I think, is that the emancipation of the popular masses is a task for the popular masses themselves. Political parties, even the best political parties, can do some things, but not without mass uprisings and the creation of alternative institutions. They can't do that much.
So everybody's up.
Thank you very much, Tariq. I think
You have to speak up.
Yes.
hello,
Hi.
I'm Sarwar Bari from Pakistan. The point which you just raised, that different professions should create their own councils. Let me inform you that in Pakistan currently, there are about 240,000 such councils. They may not be using the word council, but even donkey cart walas have their own union. Barbers Association in Pakistan is one of the largest associations, which has more than 4,000 members. But the issue is that most of their activists and office bearers are being hijacked by political parties. The moment they become popular, they are being co-opted. And they are then used because parties are not organized. So they heavily dependent on community elders like Zat Bradri issue, leadership, and as well as these special interest associations, which are in huge numbers. And we need to basically strategize that how we can reach out to them so that they could serve their own interest instead of serving the political party. And I don't know, but as far as my knowledge is concerned, in the 70s or before 70, the political parties did not have wings. Now we have women wing, we have labor wing, we have even mullahs wing in political parties. So they co-opt this leadership, which is a grassroots based leadership. So they use them during the elections to mobilize voters. So how do you look at that?
I didn't fully understand. Did you
Yeah,
hear?
yeah. So what he's saying is there are many organized civil council organizations starting from in Pakistan. There are many council organizations starting from Barber Association, but their leadership is co-opted by the political parties. That's the reason they're not being very effective. And so, can you repeat this last part?
Well, political parties co-opt them in their different wings which they have created, like labor wing, youth wing, mullahs wing. So through these wings, they co-opt all these council office bearers.
Yeah. No, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I'm aware of, the accuracy of what you're saying. But this is where I think, with the exception of Pakhtunkhwa and in many years ago of Balochistan, in the main parts of Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh, we haven't had movements that create their own institutions. Like I'm very in favor of the Pashtun Defense Organization. Very good. That can't be co-opted by the political parties. And nor have they tried, because the minute they try and do it, the army says, Gaddar hai. Do you see? So what we need is precisely organizations which are not, you can have a Baba's organization and various other of these things which are not unimportant. But what you need is movements that unify all these other organizations themselves. And as we know, the other thing political parties do and can do historically, but in Pakistan very openly, is buy them up. They buy up ordinary voters, as we know. How much money is being allocated for this constituency, and people are just given money. And this is also given to some of these institutions to bring them over. So the institutions I very much support and had in mind were the Pakhtunkhwa people, who knew how to do it and who had a reason to do it, is that their country was being bombed, drone attacked, either by the United States or by the Taliban or by the Pakistan army. So they had a reason to actually get up and do it. And without that and the need to explain that, you won't get this. And in the Punjab, it's interesting that the Punjab really voted. I mean, the PPP is just a provincial adjunct now, but the battle between Nawaz Sharif and the PTI, that the Punjab voted for the PTI, is not without interest. I'm saying that just because we don't agree with the PTI, you have to see what do people see in it, and they do see it as some form of alternative. And now they see it as some form of alternative to the army, since they've fallen out in such a dramatic way with the army. So it's just which way to, advise and push people in, and in which direction to push them in. And through the existing parties alone, and nothing much is going to happen. I mean, even if you do very dramatic, slightly ultra things, like taking on the army without any preparation at all.
Any other question here? Right, I can quickly ask something.
What is the future of Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship?
I said, what's the future between Pakistan and Afghanistan since the Americans have left?
Well, the thing there is that, as you know, the victory of the Taliban in Afghanistan was the only real victory the Pakistan army has won. And that was won. The whole thing was organized by American money and the ISI. They've admitted all this. So the notion that the Taliban emerged from nowhere, from these camps, they didn't. They were in the refugee camps. They were trained, taught how to fight, armed by the Pakistani military, and backed with, millions and millions and millions of dollars by the United States itself. That's how they came, because the government which existed there, the remnants of the government, after the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan, was not as unpopular as is being made out today. They could have lasted longer. They were trying to unite with other forces in that region, but they didn't succeed because the Taliban went in. Then, as happens, but within the factions of the Taliban, there was a pro-Pakistani faction, the Haqqanis, who worked with the ISI, and there were those factions which were more for an independent Afghanistan. It was divided. It wasn't unified. You remember that famous so-called friendly football match between Pakistan and Afghanistan when the Taliban were in power. And the Pakistani football team naturally turned up wearing small shorts. These are all men wearing small shorts and the match was disrupted, and some of them were flogged in public and saying, we don't permit this. So whatever else it was, it didn't remain a friendly football match.
That's Tariq, linked to this, the question regarding Afghanistan. So Pakistan's military establishment, they've always survived on some imperial assignments. So the issue, the issue in Pakistan is since US withdrawal from Afghanistan, there isn't any assignment in the region for the military establishment. In the 60s, we had an assignment. By assignment, what I mean is inflows of foreign exchange. So do you see, is there any prospect of Pakistan, the way situation in Middle East is unfolding? Think there's any chance of Pakistan getting some significance role in the region?
Look,
Because in fighting in the elites, right? The moment the foreign inflows dry out, so at that time the conflict starts. So any hope you think?
Pakistan, I don't think Pakistan is going to, agree. The army isn't going to agree to allow Pakistani troops to be used in the Middle East. I think that would be a real provocation.
Maybe Iran?
They've done it before. I don't know how many of you here remember. This is one of the problems. History is never taught in our schools and colleges in Pakistan. So people have very little idea of what the past of this country and its institutions is. Pakistan sent General Zia-ul-Haq, he was then a brigadier. He was sent into Jordan in 1970 at the head of a contingent of troops, Pakistani troops mainly, but not only, to crush the Palestinian uprising. Black September, the Palestinians called it. And the move to crush that was led by Zia-ul-Haq, which is why he was one of the favored generals of the United States administration. And so they have intervened there before. For a while, the Saudi army itself consisted largely of Pakistani military officers who commanded it. And I used to joke that if there was a uprising in Saudi Arabia led by migrant workers, because this was the main working class, was migrant workers who were mainly Pakistanis. The Pakistani immigrant workers leading an insurrection in Saudi Arabia would have to confront their own army yet again. That's what the situation was, but that has changed. And I don't think that
Maybe in the context with Iran, maybe in the context with Iran conflict with the main.
I don't think Pakistan, if there is a conflict with Iran, the Chinese will put massive backroom pressure on Pakistan not to get involved. Not to say, come on our side, but do not get involved in this because you will suffer. And the Iranians are quite capable. I mean, they've been calm up till now. But if Pakistan gets involved on either side in the Iran war, it will be a disastrous.
So because Tariq, we have to be realistic, right? All countries, they have their own specializations, like Bangladesh exports textiles, India exports IT. We have been like exporting like defense services, right? We are exporting defense services. Even in the Pakistan's current account, if you look at, there's a segment called Public Sector Services Export. What it means is all the defense services like officially recognized. So we have to be realistic. If there is no project in the region, the fight will be infighting among the elites because the foreign inflow stopped coming. And the crisis stops. People think the crisis started when Americans withdrew from Afghanistan. And the foreign exchange reserve dried out. That's what we have to be realistic. The assignment.
It's a question of the United States. How much are they prepared to carry on paying Pakistan? That's not an unimportant question.
Yeah.
Because Egypt is kept under control by a mega United States subsidy. If they stop the subsidy, I bet you there would be a split in the Egyptian army.
Yeah.
They keep it quiet. So how much do they give Pakistan? It's usually sent through Saudi Arabia and oil subsidies, but backed by the United States is an open question. I mean, Bhutto once said to me, and I've written this, so it's not a big secret now, when I was very critical of him, we were discussing things, and I said, you as a government minister and for you encourage the 65 war with India. Now, was that a very sensible thing to do? I just asked him. And his reply did shake me a bit. He said, my dear, how else are we going to get rid of Ayub Khan? The army had to be smashed. The only country to do it was India. And so why are you complaining? He said, we'll go to, I said, well, I am complaining because, lots of people who needed to got killed. It was a total adventure. He said, well, I don't agree. And that was the reason he gave me. Now, let me give you a footnote to this. I was in Delhi in 1984, and I had a long interview with Mrs. Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister. And she said, after I'd done my interview for a book I was working on, she said something to me which was very interesting. She said, listen, Tariq, you know these generals better than most because I've read all your books. My intelligence people are telling me that this is General Zia-ul Haq was in power. My intelligence people are telling me that Pakistan and the Pakistani military is preparing an attack on India via Kashmir, and that we should take preemptive action. So I just burst out laughing.
Which year was it?
84.
84.
I said, look, I'm no friend of General Zia-ul Haq or the generals who've, hanged Bhutto. But the one thing I cannot believe and do not believe is that they would be so crazy to attack India because you'll destroy them. I mean, they've known what's happened in Bangladesh. It would have to be a crazed army high command that would decide to attack India. You'll crush them, and that'll be the end of that. And so I don't believe it. This discussion with her went on for about an hour, till finally we didn't agree, and I went back to my hotel. There I got a call 2 hours later saying, aap to Eid ke chand ban gaye, hame milte nahi. This was sort of top Indian civil servants, pre-partition ones who were friends of my parents. They had set up another meeting. And for 2 hours, they had attacked me, criticized me, tried to convince me that Pakistan was going to attack them. I said, I don't accept it. Whatever else, they are not going to do that. It doesn't make any sense at all. And they went on, and finally I lost my temper, which I rarely do. I said, look, if you bastards want to go and attack Pakistan, do it, but think of a better excuse. Because no one is going to believe that you were attacked first by Pakistan via Kashmir. That is, now, the end of the story is this. Mrs. Gandhi had given me a message for Benazir, saying, give her my love when you see her and tell her if I'd been prime minister, rather than imprison myself when Bhutto was hanged, we would have tried very hard to stop the Pakistani army from hanging him. She said that. So I went and told Benazir this, and Benazir said, okay, well, that's very nice to hear, but why did you waste all these hours convincing them that Pakistan was not going to attack?
Right.
And I recalled her father then, what he'd said to me in 66, that the only way to get rid of them is via Indo-Pakistan war. Okay.
Making it quick. Yeah, Usman, it was Roshan and Usman together,
Tariq, you were part of the Russell Tribunal. And
Sorry?
Keep it
you
closer.
were part of the Russell Tribunal, and then you were part of the Belmarsh Tribunal for Assange.
Yeah. Can you speak a bit louder?
You were part of the Russell Tribunal, and then
You were
years,
part of the Russell Tribunal.
and then
Yes.
2-3 years back.
Oh, you moved on to something.
No, I'm coming there. But you were part of the Belmarsh Tribunal, if in the future we want to have a tribunal holding the Pakistani journalists accountable for their war crimes in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, will you like to be part of it?
Yeah, so say you were part of these two tribunals.
I was only part of the Bertrand Russell War Crimes Tribunal on Vietnam.
And the Belmarsh Tribunal for
Which one?
Belmarsh Tribunal.
for Assange.
Ah, but that was, I mean, it wasn't a proper tribunal. It was a sort of way to do propaganda for Assange. We just had half a day. So we shouldn't mix up the two things. The Russell Tribunal was a very serious thing. You know, we had people going into North Vietnam under the war, including me. We were bombed day and night by the Americans. And we saw children being killed. We saw tortured bodies. I mean, and we had teams of lawyers, doctors from many parts of Europe. It took a year to get all the evidence. Then we had the tribunal. So one mustn't mix up this with the Belmarsh Tribunal, which was fine, but it was on a completely. But what was?
But do you think holding a similar tribunal for Pakistani journalists' war crimes would be effective? And will you like to be part of it?
A Russell Tribunal on
No,
Pakistan?
I mean, said if there's a tribunal in Pakistan to look at issues in Balochistan, mainly.
In Balochistan. I don't know whether I mean, on principle, I would like to be part of these things, but I have a lot of pressure on my time as one gets older in terms of what I'm doing. So, it's a very different situation. I don't want to start a discussion on that, but I have been of the view now for some time that breaking up Pakistan is not a great idea. However awful the governments are, or the army is, that any attempts to break up Pakistan, in Balochistan or elsewhere, I mean, who does it benefit today? It's not going to benefit. So we have to find other ways of fighting. And there's, as you know, a big debate on these questions.
So we have one last question, Usman.
Okay.
Yeah. Usman, yeah.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can speak it closer, yeah.
So my question was around, generally, I mean, you've been watching Pakistan pretty closely since the 1960s. So in terms of how the Pakistani people, particularly in mainland Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh, have perceived the army since the 1960s, how do you think that has evolved? Because ultimately, whenever a martial law was imposed, there was a certain section in mainland Pakistan which used to celebrate that act. But now the narrative seems to have turned upside down in a sense that nobody welcomes martial law, nobody welcomes army's direct intervention, or they actually no longer perceived as saviors in mainland Pakistan even. Whereas they were able to maintain that perception of being the ultimate saviors and the guardians of the ideology of Pakistan for a very long time. So do you think that sort of narrative has finally fallen on its face?
So it's basically in Punjab during the last 60 years in Punjab, how the perception of the military establishment has changed for the last 60 years.
Yeah. I think it has changed. And I think one reason it's changed is, whether we like it or not, it's because of what Imran did. That big attack, symbolic though it was, did make people think. And as I said at the very beginning of the talk, the one thing Imran has done is that no one in Pakistan, whether they support him or hate him, can deny the fact that the army runs the country, the army runs its politics, the army runs its institutions. And for that, we should be grateful. I mean, the other person who said this, and we'll end on this note, was a very great Punjabi poet, Ustad Daman. Great poet. And immediately after the first military dictatorship in 1958, we'd gone to a mushaira, a poetry reading, where he was meant to be reciting. And he was reciting safe poems like "This is how the birds sing" and "This is how the lovers laugh." And we said to him in Punjabi, how many people here understand Punjabi?
National language of Pakistan.
So it's representative of Pakistan.
It's national language.
Okay. So we said to him, Ustad ji, kuch te kehwo. Meaning, we said, great poet, master, say something at least, meaning about the political situation. And we started heckling him. There's a whole gang of us from Government College Lahore. And he finally got fed up and said, "Acha pocha, shut up." So we did. And just the extempore verse. ਹੁਣ ਹੋ ਗਈਆਂ ਮੌਜਾਂ ਹੀ ਮੌਜਾਂ ਜਿੱਧਰ ਤੱਕ ਕੋ ਫੌਜਾਂ ਹੀ ਫੌਜਾਂ.
So we just end on a light note. Tariq, you told me when Imran formed his party, you met him and you advised him he should better go and have a career in Hollywood. So have you changed your opinion about Imran since then when you advised him?
Well, I mean, look, Imran invited, wanted a chat just as he was retiring. And he said in his typical way, people like you have no problems. You'll carry on writing books till you drop dead. But I'm going to be resigning. I can't carry, sports people can't carry on like this. We have to think about our future. So I said, I didn't realize sports people thought about too much. But anyway, it's good. And he said, what do you advise me to do? So I said there's no, in Pakistan, unlike India and even Bangladesh, doesn't have a national film school where kids can be educated into the art of cinema, because cinema is really an art form. And it'd be great if you could set that up. He said, no, I know all these good things you have in your head, but what should I do? I said, you could become an actor.
In Hollywood.
He said, but I've never acted in my life. And I said, has that stopped Amitabh Bachchan? I said, they'll make you, these producer directors will make you into an actor. I said, that's good, actually. I hadn't thought of that. You could become one of our lead actors in Bollywood-style movies
Jinnah was
and
an
then
actor.
raise enough money to create a film school where young people could be taught to make really good films as well. But he was very sharp. I said, okay, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go into politics. I said, Imran, please. It's a fate worse than death in Pakistan today. But he was very determined. And he said, look, I managed to get, built this hospital for my mother, the cancer hospital, which is free treatment for the poor. And that shows me that things like that can be done. I said, yeah, things like that can be done, but there are a lot of other things you'll have to do as well, unless you're very firm and committed. So I have to be honest, I never thought he would set up a party. And he told, we used to meet, he used to talk to me about it. And I said, don't play around with the religious folk too much. It's not a good idea. It'd be nice if we had a modernist type party coming up in Pakistan. He didn't sort of do that. I mean, he did flirt with them. Though it's interesting, we haven't discussed this, but none of the religious parties got any seats. Now, they're saying too that because the election was so heavily rigged, because otherwise we should have got 1 or 2, which is probably true. And then you said, I'll be So I don't know whether that is true or not. But so he had good intentions, and I hope he's learned some lessons, because, they've clearly decided not to kill him.
Yeah. So I just want to.
Normally, that's how they deal with.
So Tariq, being a devil's advocate,
Huh?
Just to play devil's advocate, some people say you have a soft corner for Imran Khan because of his position in Afghanistan and Taliban.
What? You talk to me.
No, I'm just playing devil's advocate that some people say that you have a soft corner for Imran Khan because of his position on Taliban and Afghanistan. This is openly discussed.
My position on Taliban and Afghanistan.
No, because of Imran's position on Taliban and Afghanistan, that's why you have a soft corner for Imran Khan.
Because of his position. No, his position was that my position on Afghanistan has always been that it shouldn't be occupied by foreign powers, whether it was the British who went in the 19th century, whether it was the Russians who went in the 20th century, whether it was the Americans who went in, that I am not in favor of countries being occupied by foreign powers, regardless of who is in charge there. The Taliban weren't even thought about in the early days of the occupation. And no, my soft corner for Imran is because he takes on the Americans when they should be taken on. Whereas the entire Pakistani elite just shuts up. I mean, you can look at his first statement on Gaza and compare it to Nawaz Sharif and Shahbaz Sharif or their children playing fancy dress games. You know, I mean, you can just look at the comparison. And so it's good to have a politician, at least one in the country, who's quite popular and says these things. You know, the slogan that erupted, the slogan that erupted when there were mass demonstrations, America ka jo yaar hai, ghadar hai. Who would have organized these slogans in that party? I mean, they reflected something. So just because I know there is an Imranophobia on the Pakistani left, get over it. You have to look at the country as a whole and what's going on and what is helpful and what is not helpful for progressive.
So very quick, John is here, very senior journalist. Just quick question, then we finish.
You
Yeah.
haven't mentioned something which I heard some
I'll
years
repeat,
ago.
I'll repeat.
You haven't mentioned something that I heard some years ago from friends of his when they were young, that they called him Im the Dim.
He's saying his friends who knew him when he was young, they used to call him Im the Dim.
Im the Dim.
Im the dim.
And you haven't mentioned that.
Well, that could be applied to virtually every politician who's run the country for the last 30 years. I mean, you know, what are we comparing him to? The Sharif brothers, total crooks and rogues. Zardari, who only can think
Imran,
about
yeah.
money. I mean, you know, so Im the Dim, as Friday Times labeled him in Lahore, they have a perfect right to do so, but I think Imran had some instincts which were a bit different. That's my feeling. I mean, he's not a great intellectual, nor does he pretend to be, but he does listen. And he does sometimes understand when he's going wrong. But, you know, he's changed. People change. You know, when he was a young guy playing cricket and, you know, dancing every night at Annabelle's, well, he's not the same person any longer. He's changed.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, so the quick question from there is, just I'm finishing after this, it's too long now. What's future of Imran Khan? But just briefly touching on Imranophobia, as you mentioned, in the liberal left circles, we had a lot of internal conversation on this within liberal left civil society on Imran Khan. They say, do condemn what's happening to PTI in the last 2.5 years, but don't expect them to carry a placard for PTI or Imran Khan. So there is latent tension. I think we just finish on this. Future of Imran Khan, what you see, and then we just finish because it's already.
Well, the future of Imran Khan, if he stays alive, is obviously the guy is going to fight back. And if he remains popular with the masses in Pakistan, which he could, he might be able to stage a comeback. The big question is, has he learned anything from what's been happening over the last 2 to 3 years in Pakistani politics? And will he behave differently?
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Thank
Let's
you so
hope so.
much. Thank you so much, Tariq. It's an honor for us to be here. Sorry. We've been trying to locate the books somewhere delivered in SOAS. We couldn't find it. Otherwise, you would have been able to get a signed copy. Yeah, a quick, yes.